Good evening and welcome to OneWorld Civic Engagement Program. Our program this evening is an intimate conversation with New Haven's new police chief, Anthony Campbell. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
First time at the table.
Absolutely. This is great.
And Chief Campbell had a private swearing in on June 6th. There will also be a public swearing in. And I take it the public will be able to
attend, absolutely.
To attend, okay. Yep. You grew up in New York.
Yes.
You graduated from Yale College with a degree in religious studies.
That is correct, yes.
Boy, there must be a wonderful story in between graduation and high school. You went to a Catholic high school?
Correct.
So tell us a little about that.
I grew up in New York City and ultimately went to a school called Fordham Preparatory School in the Bronx. It's taught by the Jesuits. Mm-hmm. And it was a phenomenal education, all boys school. And while I was there, I came to love how the Jesuits dedicate their lives to educating others. And that's what I really felt like I was going to do. So when I came to Yale University in 1991, that was my goal. I started out, I wanted to become a Jesuit, teach engineering or work in the prison system, and so that's what I set out to do when I got here in 91 at Yale.
Okay, you said you wanted to teach in the prison system.
Correct.
Or thing. We know, I think those who have read the preview that I posted on Facebook about my conversation with you know that you have a rather unique background, family background.
Yes.
And I am pleased that you're willing to talk about it.
Of course.
Now, your parents were together since they were teenagers.
Correct. 15 and 16 years old.
15 and 16 years old. And together they have 2 children, you and a sister.
Correct.
Okay. Your father was in and out of trouble.
Yes. He definitely throughout his life was in and out with the criminal justice system.
And then your mother was a security guard.
Corrections officer, that's right.
A corrections officer for the prison system.
Yes, at Rikers Island. Yep.
At Rikers Island. How did that influence, the fact that your father was in and out of trouble, how did that influence how you conducted your life, both as a teenager and now as an adult?
Oh, in many ways, particularly as a teenager, him being in and out of prison. My father was the type of man who was well known in the street. His entire side of his family pretty much sold drugs, were well known in our neighborhood. But he was also the type of man who said, well, I've made mistakes and my chance is over, but you have a chance. And you're smart and you're gonna stay in school and you're gonna stay away from drugs. He told me he'd better never catch me in the street. He better never catch me using drugs. And he said if he did, he was going to hurt me or kill me. And I knew he meant it. So my life, because I didn't want to be in the streets or associated with that, I stayed in the church. So it influenced my life as a teenager, which then influenced, my educational process, which influenced me ultimately going to Yale. And even as an adult, it influences me today in how I'm raising my children and in what I do. A big part of why I became a police officer is because I want to have a job that allows me to minister to other people, to meet people when they are in times of crisis and need assistance. And that's definitely what policing allows you to do.
Now, we must say also, because I'm going to try and connect whenever you put something out there that's new, you said the way you're raising your children, you're the father of 3 children.
3 boys, yes.
3 boys. Now, I find it really interesting. Your parents sent you to a Jesuit school.
Yes.
It's as if both of them, as you said, your father was in the street, but he told you and your sister, if you ever got in the street, he would hurt you.
It's a done deal, that's right.
Okay.
And we knew he meant it.
And your mother took a job as a corrections officer.
Yes.
And at times was a correction officer where your father was locked up.
Absolutely.
At Rikers Island.
Correct.
But she never left him.
Never left him the whole time. Stayed with him. And even sometimes one of the projects I had in high school was to do an interview of your parent. So part of the interview was, I asked her, how do you reconcile
Yes.
the reality that you're a corrections officer, so
Yes.
you enforce the law, but dad breaks the law and
Yes.
is even incarcerated? And she said, you know, the reality is I don't try to reconcile those things because I do my job and he knows what my job is and he respects that. He knows that I don't like what he does, but that doesn't change the fact that I love him, that I love the man. And in many ways, in my mind, especially in policing and part of my faith, it makes me think about the relationship I feel like God has with us as human beings. We sin, we do things we know we shouldn't, but it does not change the fact that God loves us. And even as a police officer, when I may have to arrest someone for breaking the law, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It means that they've done something that they shouldn't have done, but as a human being, they're still loved, and I have to treat them with dignity and respect.
Now, you had to have done very well in high school to have gotten into Yale.
Absolutely.
Did your parents see to it that, or was it just naturally that you were a good student, or, and I'm sure you had to be naturally a good student, but did your parents have rules and regulation in the house that said, these are the things you have to do because we want you to get the best education possible?
Absolutely. They, between my mom and my dad, and then because my mother was only 16 when she had me, we were primarily raised by my great-grandparents, her grandparents. And I mean, between the four of them, they had some pretty significant rules. You know, you came home, you had to hit that homework right away. You had chores. You were going to church on Sunday. You had to be home a certain time. Even when I got older and thought, but it's not even dark yet, why do I have to be home? They were pretty strict. And at times, you know, I hated it at times and balked against it and said, well, I'm older, I'm responsible, why do I need to? But when I look back on it, they had great wisdom. They realized that we want you to do better than we ever did. We don't want you out in the streets. We don't want you out there messing with drugs. We don't want you out there at parties where people are doing things they shouldn't be, or being exposed to things that you really shouldn't be caught up in. And I'm thankful that they did have those rules and regulations, because now, as a father of 3 young African-American men, I'm kind of on top of them in the same way, because my work experience and life experience has shown me that the kids who seem to get in trouble the most are the ones who don't have someone who cares about them setting boundaries and setting rules, and then it gets hard for them to navigate life.
Now, you know, you talk about boundaries and rules. So often we hear from young black men or young Hispanic men the excuse that, well, you know, my father was never at home, or my father's in the street, so I didn't have no role models.
Yes.
But you said for most of your teenage life, your father was often locked out.
Yes.
So he wasn't in the house.
Correct.
And your mother was working, and yet still you end up at Yale College and then Yale Divinity School,
Yes.
and as the chief of police in New Haven. What would you say to those young people who are using the excuse that their situation provides to say, you know, you can escape that?
Yes.
In other words, your circumstance does not define your destiny.
Correct.
So what do you want to say?
What I would say to anyone out there who is experiencing that is that you have to go above and beyond your circumstances. Because like you said, your circumstance does not define your destiny. If you don't feel like you have a positive male role model in your life, seek one out. I am a public servant. People write to me, students ask me to come to their schools. I take time away from my family to go and be there for anyone who wants me to be.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of positive role models, male role models out there. We have mentor programs, we have school resource officers. They're out there. Seek them out. And if you can't find a positive male role model, there are female role models.
Yes.
My mother was my hero. She was working. My mother and my great-grandmother, they were my heroes because they were working, they were raising families. It doesn't just have to be a male role model, but seek someone out who you know is doing the right thing and emulate them. Tell them you're looking for them to help shape you and mold you. And believe it or not, people are looking for youth that they can make a positive impact on. So there's no excuse.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because so often I have heard from students who say, well, you know, miss, my dad was never there, my mom wasn't there, and my grandmother couldn't manage or whatever. And there's always an excuse that serves in their minds as justification
For why they're doing, in many instances, something wrong, or why their life has taken a certain track. Even if you come from the worst of circumstances, at some point you can stop it and say, no, I'm taking control and I'm going in a different direction. The great thing about this country is we live in a country where there are so many programs and there's so much opportunity out there.
Yes.
If you really want someone to be a role model, if you really want to do something positive, seek it out. And if you seek it, you'll find it. And it will lead to something that is bigger than you could have ever imagined. Yes, my father was locked up, but in many ways, my grandfather, my mother, the Jesuits in high school,
they were all there.
They were all there. And there were other people, as I made friends with other people in high school, and their parents started to see that my dad was locked up, they became role models in many ways. So if you put yourself in the right position, you need to put yourself in a position so that when the opportunity presents itself, you'll be prepared to take hold of it. And that's what I'm always trying to encourage people to do. Put yourself in the position so when the opportunity presents itself, and it will, you'll be in a position to take hold of it.
Now you also, I'm going to ask my control room to put up part of your vision, part of your, what you want to accomplish as chief of police. The whole thing about a family violence,
domestic violence
center, the fact that you want young people to know that they, as you just said, there are opportunities, but that they can always do better.
Yes.
They're not, as again, poverty doesn't dictate destiny.
Correct.
Education doesn't dictate destiny, although you want people to get educated, but don't give up on themselves too early.
Absolutely.
You know, or at any point.
Yes.
Right. So those are some of the things you want to accomplish. Now, I want to talk to you about the fact that you see being a police officer almost as a ministry.
Yes.
So you didn't go on to becoming a Jesuit, but in a way you see your police career as being a minister. When did it happen that you decided, I'm going to be a police officer rather than a Jesuit? And what led to the decision?
In a big part, one of the things that led to the decision was the death of my father. I graduated Yale in 1995 in May, and in December of that year, my father committed suicide. And one of the things that happened was I got the phone call from my mother. I was living here in New Haven, and I drove down to Harlem, New York. And when I got there, my godbrother told me it was my father, he had died, and that he had killed himself.
So when your mother called, she didn't tell you that he had killed himself?
Correct.
Yes, because you have to drive.
Correct.
Yes, smart lady.
She didn't want me to, you know, I knew something had happened. I actually thought it was my great-grandfather because he was so much significantly older. I thought, oh no, Grandpa must have died. When I found out my father was dead, I was shocked, not so much by his death, but by the method. Because he'd been in the game, he had been in the street, so I always thought there's a possibility he might be in a shootout or someone would take him out over territory. Never in a million years did I think
he'd kill himself.
Correct. And when I got there, I couldn't go in the apartment because there was a crime scene. My mother was upstairs.
But he killed himself at home.
He killed himself at home. And he used my mother's service weapon to do it.
Oh my God.
So not only was the tragedy of his death, but then there were consequences because he had used her service weapon.
And your mom
Consequences
was
for
a
her.
corrections officer
At the
and-
time, yes.
My goodness.
So when I got there were New York City police officers outside, and there had been the night before a fight between Mike Tyson and someone else, and they were inside the apartment, and they were talking about the fight. But I was in the hallway of the building, and I could hear them in there talking, and I was grieving because my father was dead.
Oh, yes.
But they're in there talking about the fight.
I
And
see.
I was hurt to my heart, and I thought, you know, to be fair, one of the officers did come out, and he was like, "Who are you?" And I told him I'm his son, and he was like, "I'm so sorry for your loss." He tried to quiet the guys inside down. But the thing that really, really made me decide this is the direction I want to go was I felt like here it was, I was really hurt. And I wish that there had been a police officer who could come out and help me in that grieving process.
Yes.
And not only help me in the moment, but be someone that I could have a relationship with that could guide me, whether ultimately I wound up seeking counseling for myself because after a few months I found myself being rather depressed, helping me and my family to deal with this trauma, not just the criminal aspect of it, investigate, but the healing aspect of it. And I realized that in policing, you meet people when they're at their most vulnerable. And what they need is not just a robot. They don't need someone to come and just say, "I want the facts, ma'am," or "I want the facts, sir." They need another human being who can be with them in that moment. And not just stand with them in that moment, but be with them through the process of healing, the process of burial, the process of getting therapy, the process of handling the finances, the process of getting back and being reconnected with society. And I said, this is what I can do. This is a ministry. People ask me, you know, what do you do? You're a police officer? I say, no, I'm a cop, which for me stands for I'm a Christian on patrol.
That's interesting.
I get to literally live out my ministry.
So for you, a cop means a Christian
on patrol.
Wow. Okay.
I get to live out my faith by helping others in their times of need.
That's interesting.
You know, and it has played out really well both within the department and in my community, which New Haven is my home. You know, I made it my home for the last 26 years. People see me come and go in uniform. They knock on the door, whether I was an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, assistant chief, and I'm there to serve them. I really believe in servant leadership.
So you see being a cop or being a police officer as someone whose responsibility it is to not lock people up when they break the law, but to help people to find what is good about themselves and change the direction.
Correct. Because when you do that, if all we do is lock people up, I always try to help officers and the department understand this. When we have to lock someone up, we as a society have failed. Because before a person typically gets locked up, they're giving more cues and signs than ever that I'm off track. I'm headed down the wrong path. I'm headed towards the abyss. And they're looking for someone to just hit the brakes, grab them by the coattails and stop them and say, hey man, you need to get right on track. And when we have to make an arrest, we failed as a society. The arrest is the last resort. What we need to be is stepping in when people are off track, when the cries for help go out, when they call us and say, hey man, you know, we're in a breach, we're having a problem. You calm things down and make sure people are safe, but then you need to get to the heart. What is the issue? Is there a financial issue? Are they unemployed or can't find proper employment? Are they not properly educated? Are they not properly fed? A lot of times when you get to the heart of the issue and you can help someone to get on track, no one wants to go to jail. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm gonna go stand on the corner and sell crack. No one says, I'm gonna go shoot this person or that person. They do it because their circumstances and because no one has had enough courage to step in their life and say, I care enough about you to stop it.
But Chief Campbell, that's for the police, that's for the people who are getting arrested. What about those police officers, such as the one who drove into that park where Tamara Rice had a pellet gun, and immediately as he drove into, he took his service revolver and shot that 12-year-old kid dead? Or the officer just recently who killed Mr. Castile, after Mr. Castile said to him, I have a revolver, I am licensed to carry, I am just going to reach for my wallet. And he immediately started shooting and pumped 5 bullets in that man while the girlfriend screamed. What about those officers? What is missing from their lives? Why it is that so many young black men and women are being killed by police officers? How does your seeing yourself as a Christian on patrol help them not to kill us so much?
I think a lot of it boils down to training. One of the things that I have gathered from the New Haven Police Department is that we are excellent when it comes to training. And not simply training you in how to handle things from a tactical standpoint, but training you how to understand people and how to connect with people. And not in these situations where you may have limited time to connect, but to also to reduce the amount of fear that you have as an officer. The standard for an officer to take someone's life is not that the person shoots at you or the person comes at you with a knife. The standard is if you are in fear for your life or in fear for the life of another person. When you are well trained, well educated, and you have a connection with community, and when you learn to deal with people who are different than you, the amount of fear that you have of a person is drastically reduced. A lot of our officers, the bulk of our officers in this department are Caucasians, 55% Caucasian. And New Haven is a community which has about, if you look at the breakdown of communities about 33% African American, about 27% Hispanic, and the rest is Caucasian. So when you look at the breakdown, it's more a minority community.
Yes, you're looking at about 60-something% minority.
But you look at the police department, it's about 55%. So it is in our best interest to help all officers to understand the community which they are policing. So we literally up front bring the community in so that officers can come to understand who they're serving, so that when you stop a person and they say, officer, I have a weapon, you're not so afraid and go into that tactical mode of, oh my gosh.
Or start shooting.
Yes. Or when you arrive on a scene and you see someone with a weapon, you put yourself in a tactical position where you can make a decision, and rather than just start shooting, but you can assess the data. You put yourself in a safe position. So many police officer involved shootings could have been avoided if the people had better training, a better understanding of the people that they were dealing with, and they themselves were not afraid. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some situations where an officer, I'm not in the officer's mind, I don't know what was going on in their mind, but far too often I think police officers put themselves in positions where it didn't have to come to that level of force.
But, granted that in New Haven, we don't have police officers shooting civilians, you know.
And we've had police officer involved shootings since I've been chief.
Yeah. Oh, really? Since you've been
since
chief?
I've been the acting chief.
We did. And that's about 8 months?
11 months.
God, time flies. Okay, but I know the situation, at least I read about it in the New Haven Independent and in other media, where a young woman was slammed to the ground by New Haven police officers. Now, she didn't have a weapon.
Correct.
She, as far as I know, she was not a karate expert who was throwing chops.
Correct.
So, what accounts for the fact, because I saw the images where this young black woman was slammed to the ground, and they were on her back and
trying to get her handcuffed.
Yes. And what accounts for that type of behavior on the part of the police? Doesn't it have to do with the way black people are perceived by white officers? And how do you, as the new police chief, change, you know, because that's a huge challenge. How do you change that perception? These people have been this way ever since, well, not just since they became officers.
Right.
This is who they are as people, and then as officers, they get an opportunity to act on it. How do you deal with that so that what happened to that young woman doesn't happen to other people?
One of the biggest things we did in that particular case, which was rather unique, because one of the great things that I learned through that case is that there's always more to the story. When I looked at the totality of the circumstances, the officers, I cleared them in that case because they actually followed all of our policies and procedures. Now, could it have been handled a different way? Possibly. But they didn't violate any of our policies and procedures, and their tactics and the amount of force that they used were completely reasonable given the totality of the circumstances. But I think that one of the ways in which you ensure that an officer doesn't have a negative interaction, particularly with a person who is of a different race, different sex, different ethnicity, is by educating them and exposing them through cultural diversity training, and more importantly, through de-escalation training. We like to put our officers in situations where we put them under a lot of stress, and where we help them to understand that as a human being, whether you like it or not, you have certain biases. If you haven't dealt with certain people, certain cultures, you know, I had one officer say to me, well, he was disrespecting me because I was talking to him and he wasn't looking at me.
Oh,
Whereas
God.
in certain cultures, you're taught
not to look at
the person as a sign of respect. So it's important that we culturally educate every officer. There's so many different types of situations in a very diverse city like New Haven, where you need the officer to be comfortable with the people that they're serving. And so from day one in the academy, we start exposing them to the people that they're going to be serving. A lot of these people are coming from communities where they have, literally everyone in the community may have looked like them. And they don't look like the people that they're going to serve. So we start exposing them. We start bringing in pastors. We start bringing in youth, particularly youth, so that they can understand that in certain cultures, we talk with our hands, we're very animated. It doesn't mean we're being aggressive.
Not
it's
at
just
all,
who we are. And it is that type of training and education over a 6-7 month period in the academy that allows officers to be so much more at ease when they get out in the community. Because A, they've been exposed to the community, and the community's been exposed to them. So we're starting to meet one another kind of way further down the line than rather than throwing someone out in the community who really has had no cultural experience and de-escalation training. So I think that's one of the major ways. And when I look at, if you look at a lot of these shootings that have happened nationwide, and you really get down through the surface of what happened, a lot of these officers, they're not trained properly, they're not educated properly, and no one helps them to understand, listen, you may have a particular bias. That doesn't make you evil, but you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind and keep that in check, because if you don't, it can lead to a lot of these situations, bad situations that we've seen.
But, you know, we're going to come back and talk about the fact that I think in this country, and I've had the opportunity to experience life in several different cultures.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay? And I am often disconcerted by what I see as this attitude that America is somehow the universal nation. Our way of seeing things and thinking about things is the only way and is the right way, and everybody else are somehow wrong.
Yes.
And I think that accounts for the problems in our school system, in our police department, many of those problems. But I want my audience to know you're watching OneWorld Civic Engagement Program. We are having a conversation tonight with Chief Anthony Campbell. He's the new police chief in New Haven. He has been acting police chief for 11 months and was sworn in on June 6 by Mayor Tony Harp as the chief. And there will be a public swearing in also. And Chief Campbell has done a number of things, and he has a clear vision of what he wants for the New Haven Police Department. And I'll just tell you some of his specific goals are to address domestic violence in a more comprehensive manner as an integral part of his next generation of community policing. This includes starting a family justice center to tackle domestic violence and build more community trust in his cops. And to him, the word cops mean Christian on patrol. And I'm not sure how many of your officers will agree with you for that title, but I like it. He wants citizens, he wants every police officer to have a working body camera and a work cell phone so that people in the community know how to reach the officer who's in charge of their community precinct. Okay, you want citizens to have direct access to officers. You bring a unique family background, as we talked about before, to community policing, where both your parents have been involved with the criminal justice system from different ends.
Absolutely.
Your father was often locked up. You said he was a man who sold drugs and sometimes used drugs, and your mother was a corrections officer.
Correct.
The other thing you talked about is what your upbringing as a child and this unique family background influenced how you saw the opportunity of being an officer to be a much bigger thing than just locking people up.
Yes.
You see it as a form of ministry, a way to help people to recognize their better selves and not to become victim of their circumstances.
Correct.
And so as we talk, so you graduated from Yale in 1995, and then you went back to Yale Divinity School to earn a master's degree in
Master of Divinity.
Master of Divinity. And this was after you became a police officer.
That's right.
Now, I am jumping around a little because we have less than a half an hour left in our program. You got injured. You almost got killed as a police officer.
Yes.
Why didn't you quit after? Wasn't that a warning that, oh my goodness, your life is in jeopardy?
One of the things that, believe it or not, it was, I think that time for me was a crisis of faith. Because I always felt like coming on this job as a person who was strong in his faith, who had been led to do this line of work, led by God's Spirit, that I had kind of an air of protection around me. So when I got hurt, my first thought was, well, God, what's up with that? You know, what happened? When, and so I was hurt, and I was hurt pretty badly. I was very disheartened. I'm the sole source of income in my family. I went basically from making $90,000 a year to $40,000 a year. I found myself in dire financial straits. The neurologist told me that I probably would never get full mobility in my right arm again. I had to learn how to walk to a certain degree again. And I did think about, for a moment, quitting. But then I thought about something. I thought about the reality that if you really are a person of faith, circumstances will change. Circumstances, your life, there will be times where things get really difficult. There will be times where you feel like, but this is unfair. This isn't how it's supposed to go. I was doing the right thing. I'm here to try and make a difference, a positive difference. This wasn't supposed to happen. No. Your true faith is tested in those times of crisis, where pressure is applied. That's what determines who you really are. If you want to know who someone really is, apply some pressure and you'll see who they really are. And I thought to myself, so are you going to let a bad experience deter you from what you know God has laid on your heart? God didn't tell you to leave that job, so you don't leave that job. And I stayed, and within a year and a half, I found myself physically getting better, getting back to the point where I could return to work 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day. By 2008, I was back to work on a full-time basis. And by 2009, I had succeeded in getting my first promotion. Now, when I look back on that, in 2006, I got injured. By 2008, I made it back to work. 2009, I became a sergeant. Here it is, 8 years later, I'm now the chief of police. If I had given up, if I had just gone and said, well, you know, I'll just take the disability pension, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to touch so many people's lives. Believe it or not, that injury, that crisis, that time, even though it was terrible and financially devastating, and I had to file for bankruptcy, and there were times where I thought, how am I going to keep my home? I may lose my home. But that is where, when I look back on it, the biggest part of my testimony was built, because I had to literally count on God for everything, trust Him. And now today I sit here as the chief of police with 3 beautiful boys, a wonderful wife who I'll celebrate my 18th anniversary with tomorrow as I'm sworn in.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the biggest part for me was that when I had to go to court to testify and give my victim statement against the gentleman who hurt me, what I asked the judge to do was to forgive him. Was that, yes, he's affected my life, but the difference between he and I was simply the grace of God. He succumbed to the circumstances in his life. I didn't. And so the judge took to heart what I asked for and reduced his sentence by 5 years.
Wow.
But that young man still got sentenced to 40 years.
Oh my God.
He was 23 years old.
Oh.
With a very young child, and now he, you know, has been removed from society. I sat across from him and looked at him and thought to myself, that could be me. That could be me. The only difference is that I had some people in my life who cared enough about me to say, if I catch you in the street, like my father did, I'm gonna kill you.
Okay, oh my God, I have so many questions in my head now that you said all that, because when your appointment was first, for those, I think most people in New Haven know the background information, but there were 3 assistant chiefs who were vying for the position of chief.
Correct.
I read some pretty nasty comments in the New Haven Independent accompanying the article about your appointment. There are those who were saying a particular person should have gotten the position, and well, there were no other African American among the 3 of you.
Okay.
Okay. This other gentleman, they were saying, you know, he should be chief. And I'm sure that the people who are saying that have their reasons, but I'm not sure how many of them understand that what you bring to the table is much broader than how many years you were a patrol officer, or you know, how many years you spend at different ranks.
Correct.
When I talk to you about your background, I would like to think a totally objective person about this, but as a parent and as an educator and as someone who has followed the media about police work across the country and what police have done and the damage police have done, I couldn't understand them giving this position to anybody else besides you.
Thank you.
No, I'm serious, because I think it's like a doctor who is a general practitioner and then went back to medical school to learn to be a specialist, but didn't just learn to be a cardiologist. He also learned to be a liver specialist and you know, a vascular specialist. And so this person now comes to the table with a lot more skills applicable to general medicine. So when the patients are presented to you, you don't have to send them to different other doctors to diagnose them accurately. You can make a good diagnosis because you have this broad-based background. That's how I interpret your background and who you are. And so, how do you feel knowing that there are people within your ranks or within your police department who don't think you should be the chief? And how will that knowledge affect, if it will, your interaction with these people, and how can you use your Christian on patrol mentality, perception to heal these breaches? Very long question, I know.
No, it's okay. I am never surprised, because I'm a person of faith and because I'm a person who studied the Bible, and I believe what it says. There's a verse where Jesus Christ said, in this world you will have trouble.
Yes.
And so when I encounter people within my ranks or throughout the city, or people make negative comments, it's to be expected. I would feel weird if no one had a problem with me being the chief.
Really?
So to me, it's to be expected. But instead of focusing my energy on that, I understand that you can't make everybody happy. But my mentality of being a person of faith is, I'm going to serve those people too. I like to listen. I keep an open door policy, and if someone has a problem with me or thinks that something could be done better, I'm open-minded. I'm like, if you think it could be done better, let me hear about it. Because I don't have all the answers. And I am open to the reality that I can make mistakes. I have made mistakes. In this new position, I'm going to make mistakes. But I'm open to us doing the job in a way that works best for the department and for the community. And I think that I'm willing to serve even those who would not serve me. So that mentality has allowed me to bring together the department, because people, even those who don't particularly care for me, know that I have the best interests of this department and of this community at heart, and that I'm not going to do anything. I lay my ego aside, because the reality is no one is going to think about who the police chief is 4 or 5 years. What people want is a safe place to live, work, play, and enjoy their constitutional rights, which says they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what I want to focus on and try and make happen.
Okay. You're watching OneWorld Civic Engagement. I am having a conversation with the new Chief of Police for New Haven, Chief Anthony Campbell. And Chief Campbell says he's a cop, he's a Christian on patrol, means he's a Christian on patrol. Now, among your goals, you said you want to, among the ones we already identified, you say you also want to make sure every police officer has a body camera.
Correct.
And you want to increase the number of officers. You have 450 now, and you're budgeted for 494.
Correct.
So you're going to hire 44 more officers.
Correct, which we're currently hiring.
Okay, yes, you're currently hiring, and that's something I want people to know. The New Haven Police Department is currently hiring new officers. But here is my challenge for you. How will the training for those 44 new officers you need be different from the training that has gone on over the decades in terms of better equipping these officers to see the citizens they police as more than a color, an ethnicity, an age?
Yes.
How are you going to change their perception?
One of the biggest ways we're changing their perception is by who we hire.
Okay.
One of the biggest problems that I saw, which I've discussed with Mayor Harp and other task force that the mayor set up, is our hiring practices were screening out many people who I think would have been great candidates.
Really?
Particularly in certain areas like our psychological testing as well as our drug policies. So we have gone through and we've revamped those to make it more reflective of current society. We have also selected a psychologist who will work with our background investigators to make sure that they are not imposing any of their implicit biases to the candidates. We're also making sure that the companies that are doing the psychological testing are taking into effect, are using the current DSM standards and are taking into effect current cultural factors.
Yes.
And I think that will help who we're hiring. Additionally, once we hire those personnel, the type of training that we start exposing them to is bringing them in with the community, helping them to understand the community that they will be serving, and having a higher degree of accountability. Part of body cameras being given to each officer is for greater transparency.
Yes.
It's been proven that people act differently when they know they're on camera.
Ah, yes.
Both the people who are in positions of authority as well as the people they're dealing with. So I think that will help people not to simply see someone as a race, an ethnicity, a gender, a sexual orientation, but to deal with them as a person. Because one thing I am about is accountability. And I believe in holding officers accountable. Officers, 99% of the time, do a phenomenal job. But every now and again, we get it wrong.
Yes.
And officers need to be held accountable, because when you hold them accountable, then the society says, all right, they messed up, they took their licks, and let's keep moving forward. And then that gives greater credibility when we have to have a situation that is extreme. So I think it's important to hold officers accountable, but to also work with the community so that the community knows exactly what we can and cannot do, so that they empower us.
That takes us right where I want to go, because you said so that the community knows. What, if anything, are you doing to have effective outreach to the community,
Yes.
to help people to understand what is expected of citizens?
Yes.
And how to deal more constructively during a police encounter. Because many of our young people, you know, the same way police said, oh, this person was being disrespectful. You know, one of the things you mentioned about cultural aspects, when I was a child, see, under the British school system, if your teacher is scolding you,
Yes.
you look down
Yes.
because you're embarrassed.
That's right.
And you are paying deference to the authority in a positive way. You
Yes.
look down. Whereas here, the teacher will say, look at me.
Correct.
And you are considered as if you're being disrespectful. You don't care, so you're looking away. That's not it.
Right.
You are embarrassed, you're looking down, you're paying deference to the authority figure.
Yes.
And you're ashamed.
Yes.
So what are you going to do in your new vision to also help the community to understand and to invite input from the community? Because people are afraid to call the police and say, this is what is happening and I want to say this. They're afraid to even reach out to the police.
Yes, they are. In many instances,
What
they
are
are.
you going to do to change that?
So there are a couple of things that I'm trying to do to make sure that the community feels more comfortable
Yes.
reaching out to us. First thing, believe it or not, back in 2001, I created a program under the leadership of a woman named Katie Kodish, and it was the Citizens Academy. What it is a program where it helps people to understand what we do, what we can do, what we cannot do, and why we do it. When people go through it, everyday citizens, they get to see exactly why we do what we do, but they become ambassadors for us, ambassadors to the community. So I'm trying to create more of that, make it more frequent. Updating our website so that people can, if you want to put a complaint in
Yes.
or give us information about a negative interaction or even positive interaction, create more ways that people don't have to physically come down to the police department to put that information in. And that's one of the reasons that I want each officer to have a cell phone. Because believe it or not, when each officer has a department issued cell phone, people do not want to call the police department. They want to call their police officer.
Yes.
When you've got a personal relationship with a police officer, someone that you've watched walk the beat, that you've come to know as a human being, not just as an authority figure, then when something bad happens, particularly if you have a bad interaction with a police officer, the first person you want to call is the officer that you know is legit.
Yes.
And say, look, man, you got a problem up there. This one's doing this, that. That's what we want. That's part of it, not just them calling about officers, but calling about problems in the community so that people can, the more connected we are, the easier it is for us to not just respond to problems which have gotten out of hand, but for us to respond to situations before they become major problems. That includes police officers, and that includes community members. The sooner we are able to intervene and catch these things, the sooner we can squash it.
Okay, we have about 8 minutes left in this hour, and I have a number of questions.
Sure.
You said one of the things you want to do is to move the supervisory position out into the street.
Correct.
Tell me as crisply as you can how you're going to do that.
So we have a lot of our sergeants who are, say, at the training academy in internal affairs. I think that we can more efficiently run internal affairs with detectives instead of sergeants and put those supervisors in the street. The academy doesn't go year round. When they're not in the academy, they need to be out in the street supervising, because we've got a very young police department, and officers do a lot better when they've got a supervisor listening to what they're doing on the radio, showing up on the scene, and just making sure that everything is being done the way it should be done.
So does it, having them in the street mean that there will be precinct offices in different communities?
That's part of it. So the substations that we have,
Yes.
not so much manning the substations, but actually having the supervisors out physically in the street, going to officers' calls, supervising
I see.
and mentoring the officers as they come along. Because policing is a field where officers learn through repetition, but they also learn through a mentoring process. A supervisor who has many more years and experience can catch an officer who may be doing something wrong, unbeknownst to that officer, and say, wait, come here. That's not how you do it. You need to do it this way. Even with how you talk to people,
Yes.
They can smooth things over and say, listen, that's not how we talk to people. You need to interact, look at the person, understand what's going on. So a lot more of the mentoring aspect by getting people out from inside the office, out onto the street, doing the supervisory role that they're supposed to be mentoring.
Okay, I'm going to ask my control room to put up all of the the vision and goals that the chief has. Just keep putting them up till we do all of them.
Okay.
Now, do you have, New Haven has a lot of high schools.
Yes.
And it has, large community college. And I want to know, have you thought about having sessions like in the sociology department or the psychology department, having sessions where police officers can go into the schools and do presentations and take questions?
That's good.
As, for example, high school in the community.
Yes.
Social justice issues is their theme.
Yes.
A New Haven Academy,
Yes.
career high school, lots of high schools where our young people only encounter the police when there's something negative.
Correct.
Have you thought about having sessions where police officers just go in and have Q&A sessions?
That is something I've thought about, and believe it or not, it's something we started doing not too long ago. A lot of the schools, once I became the acting chief, invited me in, and I've done that at New Haven Academy. A couple years ago, I did it at high school in the community. But I think one of the things that needs to be done, it needs to be a far more frequent thing.
Yes, yes.
It should be part of the normal curriculum.
Yes.
That everyone not only gets exposed to a police officer in a controlled, positive setting,
Yes.
but also I think it allows people to see us for who we are. Human beings who have families, who are committed to the community, who want to make a difference. When people get to see that, A, it helps them to relate to the police, and B, it makes them think about, well, maybe that's something I want to do. So
Yes,
it's an early recruiting
exactly.
tool.
Yes.
We have a public safety academy over at Hill House, and that's one of the things we've started doing. We want to expand that to all of the schools, so it's a great idea.
Yes, I remember the two young men from West Haven High School talked about never encountering the police unless it was something negative.
Yes.
So there's no trust.
Yes.
Because every experience they had was negative. I told you about one shared an experience where he was shopping with his mother in the Milford Mall.
Yes.
And he had his hood, it was in the winter, he had his hood up, and the police officer or a security person came to him and said, you have to take your hood off or you have to leave.
Right.
It's not even as if it was an order.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't that we have a policy that says no hoodies or whatever.
Right.
Is that you have to take it off or you have to leave. So it is immediately confrontational.
Right. Rather than establishing, hey, can I talk to you for a moment?
Yes.
We have a policy. We've had some issues here. When
Yes.
you take the time,
Yes.
that extra time takes time to connect, but it makes all the difference in the world.
Now you're going to have new police cruisers.
Yes.
Now, is that because you want to have more police visible presence in the community? So you want people to see the cruisers, and then that might
Not so much for them to see the cruisers, but more for them to be officers to be able to respond to calls for service. One of the things that, you know, the police department is a business, and if you call and you're put on hold forever, after
You
a
give
while
up.
you get
Yes.
frustrated.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we want people to not have to wait if, God forbid, they have a car accident or someone, you know, breaks into your home. Officers need to be able to respond quickly. So that's the main thing. But it does add to a higher level of visibility when the officers have the cruise lights on, and it gives people a greater sense of safety. So that's important, but mainly it's for safety for the officers to be able to respond. The cruiser is their office, and they take great pride in the job, in the cruiser, and not only do they, but the community does as well.
Okay, you have about a minute and a half to tell us anything that I haven't covered that you want the community to know.
I think the community should know that my job is to work myself out of a job. I want to develop the leaders in the New Haven Police Department, because there are a lot of them who I think that with the right education, with the right leadership training, we shouldn't simply be looking at who's going to replace me, but we should be looking at how can we change this entire region by having other leaders, other chiefs who have the community policing philosophy. Because if we can do what we've done here and have it being done elsewhere and work collaboratively with surrounding departments and other agencies, we literally can change this entire region.
Okay, and you want the community to reach out to you. People who have ideas, you want them to share their ideas
Absolutely.
with
We
you.
want those ideas to be shared with us. I have an open door policy. Come, I extend my hand.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate you letting me talk to the community.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And please check our YouTube channel, our OneWorld YouTube channel. We'll have this and other programs on there for you. Visit us on Facebook. Please like our OneWorld page on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can watch us every Monday night at 8 p.m. on this channel, on channel 26 in New Haven, Hampton, and West Haven. We're also on Comcast in the Valley. We're on Charter Communication up in the 14 Midwestern town. And we're along the shoreline, Wallingford, North Haven, Brantford, North Brantford. We at OneWorld are here to help the community with good information as often as we can. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.